Last class we discussed the operating clauses, and today we are starting on the boilerplate clause. Boilerplate clauses are, in a simple term, um standard clauses which are included in the contract, and most often these are not negotiated. But some of these boilerplate clauses are negotiated quite extensively. So we'll focus on some of the boilerplate clauses. I have divided this chapter in two sections. So we'll discuss some of these today and rest in the next class. So the first one is covenant. If you remember in our initial classes, we discussed what covenants are. So basically, these are obligations. So sometimes instead of a scope clause where you will include the details of the transaction as well as the details of the responsibilities of the parties, you may have a separate clause which is maybe known as rights and obligations of the parties or covenants. So these are obligations ancillary to the main scope. And in general meaning, covenant means that a formal agreement, it can be a written, signed, sealed one, and that is a legally binding one. So, in other words, a promise or an undertaking, and these can take either a positive form or a negative form. So, when you ask another party to do an act in a positive manner or a negative manner, so that will be considered as a covenant. Next one is condition precedent. This is commonly found in transactions which have kind of obligations attached to it. So those preconditions have to be fulfilled, and once those preconditions are fulfilled, then the transaction is consummated. So it is not enough that you sign the agreement, but after signing of the agreement, parties will complete their respective obligations and that transaction will execute upon completion of those conditions. So this type of transaction will happen in a share sale agreement where a company's share is bought by another organization. So due diligence can be one of the condition precedents. Uh, Verification of the account books, that can be one of the preconditions. Closure of any outstanding claims or court cases, settlement, that can be a condition precedent. The condition precedent refers to something that must happen before something else will happen. So, for example, payment is condition precedent for supply of goods. So, in share or asset purchase transactions, you will find this type of separate clause, and these type of clauses are used to mitigate risks, if any, found during the due diligence prior to the acquisition. So, if a party is entering into a transaction for sale of, let's say, subsidiary organization, then the buyer will conduct a due diligence. And during the due diligence, if they find something, then they will ask the seller to fulfill certain preconditions or conditions precedent before entering into the execution of the transaction. In acquisition agreements, condition precedent example could be that there is satisfactory financial and legal due diligence of the target company. The valuation report is submitted by the merchant bankers, the board of the acquiring company, as well as the target company. Both of them approve the transaction, and the transaction is also approved by shareholders, bankers, or lenders of the target company. Next one is representation. So we have studied warranties and representations as a common clause, but representations is different from warranties. So what representations are? Basically, these are statements that a party makes to another as an inducement to enter into the agreement. These are commonly statement of facts and they are not same as warranty. So if I am saying that the car uh, that I'm selling to you is of certain uh, gives me some mileage and that mileage is X per liter. So that is a statement of fact and that is the inducement for the buyer to purchase the car. So that can be included as a representation in the contract. The breach of representation, if any, will allow the another party to avoid the contract. So it becomes voidable at the option of the buyer if there is a breach of representation. So if my statement that the car is giving the mileage of X number per liter and that is found untrue, then that will be considered as breach of representation and the another side can avoid the contract. The breach of warranty, on the other hand, allows the other party to claim damages. Next clause is warranty, and warranty is also sometimes known as defect liability period. This may commonly be found in EPC contracts. So, what warranty is, it's kind of an assurance as to facts or reliability upon certain aspects of goods or services. So, if I'm saying that the goods that I'm going to supply to you matches with the sample that I have shown to you, or all the goods that I'm going to supply to be you will be of certain specification. So that is kind of a warranty. It is also known as implied warranties. There are some express ones, there are some implied ones. So if I'm saying I am giving a warranty that my product will run for 1 year after this date of purchase, so that is a warranty in which is an express warranty. But if there is a sale, then there is an implied warranty that it is fit for the intended use. It is of merchantable quality. So if you remember your sale of goods law, then those implied warranties are covered under the Sale of Goods Act. A defect liability period is similar to a warranty period. So what happens that if there is a defect during the warranty period or a defect liability period, then the person who is giving the warranty will be responsible for curing those defects. So if you are giving the warranty, so as a warranty giver, you should review what warranties you are giving because there will be a cost of that warranty. And when you are, let's say, offering some goods to the buyer with the warranty, then the cost of the goods will include the cost of warranty. Because let's say if you have to repair a product during the warranty period and you're expecting that there will be three such occasions, then on those three occasions you will have to send skilled manpower to repair. There will be some travel costs, there will be some incidental costs like parts. So those costs have to be covered. There may be exclusions to warranty. So what exclusions will there be? For example, if there is a damage to the product caused by the user himself, then that those cases will be covered by the exclusion of warranty clause. Another example could be where the user has not used the product as specified. So, for example, if it is a TV and he has used the TV with a, let's say, directly plugged with a battery instead of proper 220-volt power source, and the damage happens, then that will be excluded from the warranty. Or if it is because of a voltage fluctuation. So, in those examples, there will be exclusion of warranty that will be triggered. B2C warranties are different from B2B contracts. So B2C is basically business to consumer. So consumers have a higher level of protection. So most often you will find that in consumer forums, if a consumer makes a complaint because of uh, let's say non-provision of service in time or non-availability of part, so it will be considered as a breach of express warranty as well as implied warranties, and in those cases, court will also grant some compensation to the customer. In B2B contracts, on the other hand, there is no implied warranty, or if there is, then most often you will have a clause which excludes the implied warranty. So, in those cases, whatever is stated expressly on the contract will only be considered as the express warranties. The relief which will be available in case of a breach of warranty of B2B contract vis-a-vis B2C contract will be very different. The onus of evidence, the proving the damages will be higher in case of a B2B contract. So a retail consumer, individual consumer will have a lower, requirement to prove that he suffered a damage. In terms of exclusions, again, B2B contract can be very limited in scope, but B2C contract warranties are wider in scope in terms of implied warranties that we already discussed. Then there is a concept also known as latent defects. It's kind of a series defect or an inherent defect. So, for example, if the product quality is doubtful and seriously impacts the use of the goods, and this inherent defect was not discoverable at the time of inspection, by way of inspection during its delivery. Those defects, especially also known as manufacturing defects, may be considered as latent defect. The B2B contracts will have specific clauses on latent defects, which will have a definition of the latent defect, which may also put additional requirements of what that latent defect could be. So, for example, if you have supplied 100 TVs to a B2B consumer, let's say a dealer, then in those cases you will say if out of those 100, a 20 minimum 20 numbers of TVs become defective, then it will be known as a latent defect, otherwise not. So if even if it is a 19 TV which became defective, it will be excluded because of the latent defect clause. In addition to the relief of free of cost repair or replacement, in case of latent defect, the customer can also demand compensation for losses suffered. There can also be an indemnity clause for compensating the loss. Then there is performance guarantee. So usually in works contract or EPC contracts, there is a obligation to perform the transaction or the works in a timely manner. So with that performance, there is a guarantee taken by the client. So if there is a project which is executed by, let's say, NTPC, then NTPC will ask the contractor to submit a performance bank guarantee. So if he fails to meet that performance, let's say if he's constructing a power plant and that power plant does not produce certain power upon when it becomes operational, then that shortfall of power that will be considered as a loss to the NTPC, and NTPC will uh, use that loss and recover that loss from the performance bank guarantee. So basically, performance bank guarantee is used for ensuring proper performance by the contractor. The bank guarantee is a separate contract from the actual contract. So you will always have to remember that bank guarantees are independent contracts because bank guarantees are executed by the issued by the banks, and it is issued in favor of the client. So it is separate from the contract between the client and the contractor. So it is an independent contract. And irrespective of the contractual dispute status, the client, if they consider that there has been a performance breach, then they may enforce the contract. But there are certain conditions attached to it. So I suggest you study about the case law on this. Next is the timely performance. So in addition to performance, there is a timely completion obligation. So there can be guarantees relating to timely completion. So let's say if there is a clause that says that the project has to be completed in within 2 years from the execution of the contract, and if there is a delay, then in those cases there will be liquidated damages that may be levied. So the contract will say that the uh, project has to be completed by the contractor in say 2 years, and if there is a delay, then the contractor will have to pay liquidated damages for X% for every day delay up to a maximum cap of, let's say, 10% of the contract price. Now, there is extensive case law on liquidated damages. There are two types of damages. One is a general damages and one is a liquidated. So, general damages are also known as non-liquidated damages. For claiming non-liquidated or general damages, you have to prove the loss by actual documentation. And in case of liquidated damages, it is triggered. There has You only have to show that there was a loss. You don't have to prove the loss. You have to just show that there was a loss. The happening of the loss itself will trigger the liquidated damages clause. And the another condition is that this has to be a reasonable amount. It cannot be in form of penalty. What is reasonable, what is unreasonable is a subjective criteria, but there is a way around that the industry has adopted, is that they start with a very minuscule number, let's say 1%, 0.1% per day of the contract price for the delay, which goes up to 10% or 15%. Beyond that, it is considered that it is a, uh, I mean, penal clause. It's a form of penalty and not in form of damages. So the court may disregard those kinds of clauses. So we have to be very careful to draft the liquidated damage clause. So I think in today's discussion we have only this much. Next class we will be discussing the second part of the uh, this particular section. Now coming back to questions if you have any. So let's start with Anshuji. Any questions?
So nothing for now. Once I'll read if I have anything, I'll get back to you.
Okay. So did you study the lesson?
So I've been through like the lesson one and two. Rest I wasn't able to do because my exams were going on,
Okay, okay,
semester exams. So
okay. Whenever you get
college I
time,
just go
study
exam.
these lessons. These are basically summary of what we have discussing. So not much there. You can just spend 15 minutes per lesson and that will be enough. Anyways, good luck for your
Yes.
exams. Arti ji, do you have any questions?
Nothing as of now, sir.
Okay. Govind ji, any questions? Yeah.
Sir, I don't have questions now,
Hmm.
but I will ask questions in the group later.
Okay. Sure. No problem. Hare Krishnan ji. Okay. Sorry. Legal AAK. I'm not sure what's your full name. Showing legal AAK. Any questions? Yeah, no. Any questions? Okay. Nosheen,
Yes, sir. I have one question.
yeah, go ahead.
So coming back to the liquidated damages,
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to drafting a mandate or like memorandum of understanding, can
Mm-hmm.
we put this clause of liquidated damages in such contracts?
Memorandum of Understanding. I don't think Memorandum of Understanding will be a document where you are putting strict obligations on the other side. So you may not be expecting any damages to happen there. Liquidated damages clause are very common in asset purchase agreements, share sale agreements, EPC contracts, or project contracts. So those kind of contracts will have this.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Pradhamji, any question?
Sir, I wanted to know that while drafting these, um, these a contract, like would I put all these clauses that you just taught us, like representation, condition precedent, and performance guarantee, in one single heading, or would there be different headings for all these different clauses, like latent defects? So would it be merged into one single heading, some representation and warranties, or there could be different headings for it?
It can be different heading or it can be in one. For example, you may want to include the liquidated damages in the warranty clause itself along with latent defect or along with performance bank guarantees. So it's depending on the length of the document. So if it's a very extensive project, then in that case you may have separate clauses, and these may not be simple clauses. There may be some additional sub requirements of these clauses. So latent defect, I just said that it is you may find a definition of what is latent defect, but there may be reference of that latent defect in the warranty clause, which is that in case of common breach of warranty or in case there is a warranty claim, what will happen, where the warranty is general within the warranty period, and beyond the warranty period there will be a latent defect liability period. So after the during the latent defect liability period, general warranties will be excluded, but if there is a latent defect, those latent defects will be attended by the contractor. So you may have a common clause, or for the warranty, within warranty, you may have latent defects. You may also have performance breach clauses. You may also have performance guarantee clause, or you may have these clauses as separate clauses in a contract. Not all contracts will have these boilerplate clauses. These are some of the important ones. So I picked these at the initial stage. Uh, Going forward, we'll also see some non-important ones, which are, for example, a notice clause. So in a notice clause, you can simply say that parties will give notice in writing to each other, then only it will become valid. You may say that this has to be sent by registered post or by email, then only it will be considered as a valid notice. So there may be some specific requirements under a notice clause, or you may simply say that whatever notice the parties give, it has to be in writing. That is all. So whether it is by letter, by registered post, courier, or by email, it doesn't matter as long as it is in writing. So these are those type of boilerplate clauses which are not extensively negotiated. So if you get a format, you may agree to it simply. But the clauses that we discussed today, those clauses may be extensively negotiated because it affects the cost associated with the product or the service or the works. So performance bank guarantee is a huge additional cost for the contractor. As a contractor, you're expecting the client to pay up. You may want to get some advance amounts, but to secure those amounts, to secure the payments from the client, you may have to give, let's say, 5% of the contract price as a performance bank guarantee. There can be a advance payment bank guarantee. There can be a liquidated damages related. So there can be different types of bank guarantees that client may ask. These are costs of the project. So for contractor, these are costs that he has to bear. And these secures the client's rights to claim the warranties, because after completing the project, this is the only amount that that will be retained by the client. So during the latent defect liability period and during the warranty period, the client may ask you for a different set of bank guarantee. So during warranty period, the value of the bank guarantee will be equal to, let's say, 10% of the contract price. But during latent defect liability period, it may get reduced to 5%. So once that period gets over, only then the client returns the bank guarantee. So until then, it is a cost, and these costs are very huge because the project cost is very high. So these cases are, I mean, you will find it quite later if you are dealing in contracts for projects. Then you may find that these clauses are extensively negotiated. Any other questions?
No, sir.
Okay. So I think we will move to some sample clauses. I'll show you just a second. Before moving on to the sample clauses, uh, there is a uh, link that I have mentioned in the this thing lesson. So if you get a time, you check that link. It's an article and it has some of the boilerplate clauses. So what are common boilerplate clauses? What is the meaning? A general meaning of these clauses. So for example, just like we discussed condition precedent, there can also be condition subsequent. There can be confidentiality, which we'll discuss later. Consequence of termination clause, we already discussed it in the term and termination clause in our operative clause part. But in a sense, yes, consequence of termination clause is a boilerplate clause because it is not common in all contracts. It is used very rarely, and it is used only if there is a serious consequence of termination. For example, in a project contract, if the contractor has been given site access, then upon termination, his site access will be revoked. Then he has to take back his material from the site, and he should be allowed to do that. And he may have to restore the site or clean the site when he is leaving, and he may have to pay some costs associated with the damages if he has caused any before he is allowed to take back. So I mean, kind of boilerplate, yes, in specific types of contracts. And but in a service agreement, you may not find these clauses. Cost clause, once again, it is part of price or payment terms, which is an operative clause. But cost may be included where it is a significant amount in addition to the contract price. So you may have a structure where the contractor is performing the contract based on the contract price plus cost or cost plus margin basis. So in those cases, the contractor may ask for cost also. So what is a cost? What is that definition which qualifies as a cost? That becomes very important. Then there can be entire agreement clause, force majeure clause, which we'll discuss in next class. So there are some examples. I suggest you keep this as a ready reference. So in addition to the class lessons, you may refer to these articles or you may find few articles of your own what boilerplate clauses are. There can be a separate discussion in some articles where it says that uh, this is a part of operative clause or this type of clause is part of a boilerplate clause. So don't get confused with that. You just have to remember that some of the clauses, whether they are part of operative or boilerplate, They have to be thoroughly checked and negotiated properly to put forth your risks, to protect your risks. If you're representing a client or a contractor, you have to watch out for these clauses. Some of the clauses, like a notice clause, it's not so important. So these clauses are for knowledge bases and these are required. Definitely these are required, but it is not something that you will waste your time negotiating on. Now, coming back to the live clause that you all drafted in last session, do you want to discuss that, or should we start discussions on today's examples?
So I think we should discuss those as well
Hmm.
because we discussed only couple of
Sure,
clauses.
sure. So I did not get chance to review those clauses after our last session, but today we'll try to understand how we can improve those clauses. Just a second.
So where is the list of these clauses you were just discussing with us?
If you read the lesson number 5, which I shared in my email with the team meeting, the Google Meet link, in that there is this link.
So I just looked through it. I couldn't find it. Could you please?
Go to your Google Calendar or okay. So let's start with Govind's clause. We discussed what will there be in a scope clause. Now, what he has written, I'll read it out. The service provider, Mr. Deepak, so he's an individual, agrees to provide the service of recruiting the employees on behalf of XYZ Company Limited. Now, in this first sentence, if you are saying service provider, let's say both the service and the word provider is a capitalized term or a defined term where you have identified that Mr. Deepak in the party's detail is a service provider, then in that case, it is not required to say Mr. Deepak again. Then, when you're saying service provider agrees to provide the service, you can simply say the service provider shall provide the service of recruiting the employees on behalf of XYZ Limited. Now, you can also say because there is no employee as such right now because he has to yet, I mean, first the service provider has to solicit the CVs of um, the candidates who meets the requirement. So those kind of statements have to be put in. So we have to say that the service provider simply will provide following services. Step 1, he will identify the candidates as per the requirements of the posts advertised by the company. He will discuss with these clients the requirements if they are interested for applying for the post. He will discuss, let's say, what are their expectations. And after collecting these informations, he will share this information with the company. So this will be a list of activities that he has to do as part of service. This is just first set of obligations. Then the company will evaluate these details and inform the service provider to further arrange a meeting or a interview with the prospective employees. Now, in relation to that arrangement of meeting or interview, he will coordinate with HR team of the company. So there can be XYZ things. Then let's say in these type of contracts there is a condition that the prospect has to be selected as an employee. there will be some period of probation. So once that period of probation gets over, then only he gets paid. Maybe he gets paid some initial amount at the stage when that prospective person is hired as an employee, and rest of it, if the person stays back as an employee or completes the probation period. So those kind of clauses can be there. So when you are saying in the second part, in exchange of monthly remuneration. Now, remuneration you have to remember is a payment which is not clear whether it is a fixed fee or it is a repeating fee, it is payable monthly or whatnot. So, we have to be very specific. So, we have to say that in consideration of performance of the service, the company agrees to pay to the service provider a sum of rupees this, and upon completion of event A with x minus 1 and balance on completion of event 2. Now, in the second sentence, Govindji, you have included that Deepak ji will be responsible for selection and interviewing and selecting the candidates for the post. Now, if as a company you do not have the power to do that, then your consultant is doing that for you, then yes, there can be a situation. For example, in high profile hirings of CEOs or key managerial persons, it may be suitable that the skill set is checked thoroughly by a very skilled consultant. And then the final candidate, a couple of candidates are sent to the client for an interview. But it is the client who ultimately takes the call of selecting the candidate for the post. So, as a contract drafter, you have to understand this type of transaction, that who will be taking the decision. Is it the consultant who is taking the decision? Is it the company? So, from that perspective, this clause may have to be revised. Now, coming to Noshin's clause, Govindji, do you have any questions before I move to Noshin's clause?
No question, sir.
I hope you understood.
Yeah, yeah, I understand.
Okay, thank you. Noshinji, let's read your scope clause. The service provider agrees to provide the consultancy services pertaining to sale and marketing of the scheduled property, and the company agrees to facilitate the service provider with all details and obtain the consultancy services at the rate of 400 per square feet. Now, this is quite vague. My suggestion would be that you separate this first sentence and you only talk about what all has to be done by the parties as a obligation. So if I would have to draft this, then I'll say the service provider shall provide the following services. It will be sale and marketing of scheduled property of the company. Then it will say company will provide all information relating to the scheduled property to the service provider for performance of the service. Uh, then, if the company is allowing the service provider to, let's say, take certain call regarding the value of the sale that may happen, if he is allowed to sell the particular unit, then the company may say in the clause that the service provider is authorized to offer a X price for the scheduled property to the prospective buyer. Uh, then I will come on the fees clause in a separate one. I will say that if a particular sale happens, in that case, I will pay him a success fee of, let's say, 400 rupees at the rate of 400 rupees per square feet for each unit sold. So that specificity of the clause has to be there, that what payment term has to be included in the contract, when that payment clause will get triggered, on happening of what event, and how it will be triggered. So unless there is a sale, there cannot be any payment. Or if, let's say, if he's also doing some marketing activities, then company may be bearing some expenses of that service provider. So you may say that subject to submission of proof of expenses relating to travel, or let's say any other ancillary stay or something. So those kind of expenses, when the consultant or service provider submits the proof of those expenses, they will be reimbursed by the company. So there is a fair deal in terms that the company is paying some amount for the expenses incurred by the service provider. In the term clause, you said the agreement shall commence from dated. Now, this is dated word is, I mean, not required because you are specifically mentioning the particular date. So you can simply say either you define it, so you can say from the effective date, or you can simply say from 4/12/2022 and shall be valid up to 4/6/2023. Now, the part where you're saying with a grace period of 3 months, instead of saying that, you can simply say that this is valid up to 4/9/2023. Then the renewal can be a separate sentence. You can say that upon expiry of the term, parties by mutual consent may agree to a renewal of the contract. Any questions, Noshinji?
No, sir, now it's clear. I got it.
Right.
Thank you, sir.
Anshuji, let's come to your clause. The consultant agrees to provide certain consultancy and advisory service to the company in accordance with the terms set out in this agreement. Okay. The services shall include advisory, mentorship, and strategic advice for the growth of the company and to assist the company in developing the business strategy. Services are described more detailed in Annexure A. Okay, very good. The only thing is that the statement that you have mentioned here, that certain consultancy services and then what those services, nature of those services are. So this is quite subjective. Subjective meaning that you cannot measure. But when you say that as part of a strategic advice, the consultant is required to prepare a report on how the company's business should operate, what metrics should be followed, or what uh, way arounds or reorganization of any sale policy or strategy should be done, those kind of metrics, and then he has to submit a report. So that is a measurable thing. So those kind of things can be included in the annexure. So you can simply say that the consultant agrees to provide these services as described more detailed in Annexure A. So that one statement will cover, and in the Annexure A you can list out and you can put an obligation on the consultant to provide a report within a certain time period. The term and termination clause, the agreement shall commence upon the effective date and continue until terminated in accordance. This is also fine. Either party may terminate the agreement by providing written notice in case of default of material obligation, following at least 30 days written notice to the defaulting party. Now you can improve this statement. Okay, you can say that either party may terminate this agreement by giving 30 days advance written notice in case of a default of material obligation by the other party. Now, because you have already said in the first line by providing written notice, and you are repeating it again at least 30 days written notice. So you can simply use that in the first line itself. Is that okay?
Yes, sir, got it. Thanks.
So I think our one more observation I have in these clauses that we are not using the capitalized terms. I understand this is very initial stage for you, so it's okay. But this word agreement can be defined, so I can capitalize it. I may have a definition of the term. So when I'm saying that it is valid from this date to that date, then I can put it within brackets. So I'll show you how to do that later on. Now, and we also have to use the language of simple statements and keep it concise. So we have to watch out what we are writing and how we can shorten it without changing the meaning. So if we can use less words to convey the same meaning, then we should try to do that. Pratham ji, let's come to your clause. Service provider agrees to provide consultancy services regarding hiring of employee for the company ABC for the agreed time frame. Agreed time frame. Can I ask what you intend by this, Pratham ji, for the agreed time frame?
So I guess I wanted to write
Hmm.
the time that has been defined in the definition clause. Uh, that's why I don't remember putting frame there. But agreed, maybe that I had already defined the time in definitions clause and whatever the
No,
definition
what
clause.
that time frame is basically what you want to say. Do you want to say that the consultancy service has to be performed within, let's say, 6 months from the execution of the contract?
No, I wanted to say that the consultancy services will do that this for 2 years or for 3 years, like
Oh,
they will do
okay.
the.
Okay. So in that case, is it not better if we separate it by saying that the agreement term is 2 years, and during that term, we are saying in the scope clause that he's performing this service. So by implication, because the contract is culmination of various clauses, and if we read these two clauses at different places, we can relate that and we can say that the consultant is providing a service which is XYZ, and in the second clause it says the term of the agreement is 2 years. So of course it is understood that the services has to be provided for 2 years, isn't so? Then service provider agrees to conduct test and interview appropriate candidates, comma is not required, on the parameters agreed with the company ABC. Okay, this can be improved to say that service provider will provide the consultancy services as follows. You are following consultancy service or following service. So you can say consultancy service regarding hiring of employee based on company's requirements or parameters provided by the company. Because in these situations, consultants do not have that kind of power to mutually agree with the company on the parameters. Because company, let's say, is hiring a senior management role candidate, is looking for a candidate which is a senior management profile, and they have a specific requirement for that profile. He may, let's say, be an MBA, he may also be an engineer. So if that is a requirement that the company is looking, then consultant may not have a say on that requirement. So we have to be careful with our words to that effect. Then the third sentence is service provider shall also be responsible to conduct inquiries relating to background check. Okay, that is also fine. But we can simply say that consultant or the service provider submit back shall conduct the background verification of the shortlisted candidates. So we should shorten this sentence. Term clause. The agreement shall commence from the effective date and would remain operational for 2 years and end on the termination date. Oh, uh, I think Pratapji, in this sentence, we can simply say, let me show you how I will say it. So I think you all will understand. How about this one?
Yes, sir, much better.
So what I am saying here is that effective date is a defined term already in the initial stage. So I have referred to that here, and I'm saying that the agreement is starting from effective date and it will remain valid for a period of 2 years after the effective date. And this entire 2 year period is a term. Now, when you're saying termination date is something very different from the expiry. Okay, so on 2 years, completion of 2 years, the agreement will expire. But a termination date can be a date when a party gives a notice to the other party and terminates the agreement. So that date will be considered as termination date. Sorry. Next is company ABC will have an option to extending the service for another 1 year. I think I will not use company ABC. I will only say company at its sole option may extend the agreement. How about this one? Is it okay?
Sir, do we need to give like option to only single company, or do we need to say that both companies are included in this?
See, it is the intention that is reflected from what you have written. Therefore, I have said that company at its sole option may extend. If you had written that company and the service provider mutually agree, may by mutual agreement extend the agreement, then I would have rephrased that accordingly. So, what you have written, I have just revised it.
Okay, sir.
Okay, now coming back down, are these G's clause. Termination for breach. A party may terminate this agreement by giving written notice to the defaulting party in case of material breach. Okay. Provided if the party in default fails to cure, remove that within. Although this is a little lengthy one, but I think the idea is captured here. Uh, in the one part, RTG was saying that party may terminate this agreement by giving written notice to the defaulting party in case of a material breach. And if the party fails to uh, cure that breach or defect within 15 days from the date of notice. So this is the second part and the of my clause, and the second part of your clause that in case there is a default of breach of the agreement, then other party may terminate by immediate effect by giving written notice. But it has to be said that that breach is not capable of remedy. Then you get a better right to terminate it forthwith. So this is the standard form of writing such kind of clause, that if there is a material breach, then the non-defaulting party may terminate, and that termination be forthwith by written notice if that breach is not capable of remedy. And where such breach is being capable of remedy, then there will be an advance written notice and default or not advance, just a written notice, because you have already given one. So it will be terminated by written notice where such breach is capable of being remedied, but the defaulting party fails to cure that within 30 days or 15 days of written notice from the non-defaulting party. So non-defaulting party has already sent a written notice, asking the defaulting party to cure the breach because that breach is capable of remedy, and the defaulting party has failed to cure that breach. So some revision can be there in this clause, but the idea is that the breach that cannot be remedied, in those cases termination will be terminated immediately. But for breaches which can be remedied, there will be an opportunity given to the defaulting party to cure that. Is that okay, Aarti ji? Aarti ji, any observations? Okay, I think she is not able to hear. Okay. Krati, this contract may be terminated by the company wholly or partly at any time by a given written notice at least 30 days in advance. For such termination, uh, licensee shall be paid under the terms of this contract for all the services provided by the consultant till the termination of this contract. Okay, but I can shorten this statement, the first one, by saying that the company may terminate this contract either in whole or part at any time by giving advance written notice of 30 days to the other party or licensee. In case of such termination, the company agrees to pay for the services already received from the consultant. Okay, so licensee and consultant are, I understand, same thing. So we should use either one of these. Okay, any questions till now? I think these are the only clauses that we have left. Anyone? No questions?
No, sir.
Great. So for today's class, instead of me discussing these clauses, the boilerplate clauses, I'll give each one of you a homework. Okay. I hope all of you can do that. So pick any of these two clauses of your choice. Okay. And prepare a standard clause. Uh, so it can be anything. You can take any facts that you want, any type of, uh, I mean, let's say background that you want for the transaction, whether you want it to be a, let's say, license agreement, you want it to be a lease agreement, or you want it to be a service agreement, whatever you want. So pick anything, okay, and pick any of these two clauses and put your answer by way of email to me, marking it. Also, if you can, then mark it in the group or the Telegram group so that everybody can see. Or we can take that particular discussion in next class. So we will review whatever work you have done and in the next class and we'll discuss. Is that okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So Govind
Yes,
ji, I'll look forward to your
sir.
submission. Nausheen ji, is that okay?
Yes, sir. So I have one question. Like,
Mm-hmm.
which clauses should we pick? We should work on scope and term clause only, or like
No, no, we
from the
already discussed the scope and termination in last class. So this was
yes,
a
sir.
draft prepared during the class. So this is something we
Okay.
already did. Now we are discussing the boilerplate clauses. So lesson number 5, whatever clauses are
Okay.
there, pick any two clauses that you want to draft. Okay, do that. Okay.
Okay, sir. Sure.
Okay. Anup ji, is that okay? Pratham, Hari Krishnan ji, is that okay?
Yeah, yes, sir. Okay, sir.
Okay. Hari Krishnan ji, okay?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Okay. Aarti ji, is that okay? Okay,
So
Adi.
that
Yeah.
means we have to draft these any two clauses from
Hmm.
any facts. Similarly, in this exercise, in the past exercise that we did.
Not necessary. You pick your exercise, whatever you want to pick. You, you see. I only want two clauses from each one of you. Okay. So whatever clause you want to draft, pick any two, and whatever background you want to give, take think everything you do. Okay. I just need two clauses, and I prefer that you send that to me by email, and we'll discuss that in next class. Okay. Yeah, Anupji, I saw you raised hand. Is there any question? Okay, question was capitalization is sufficient or inverted commas should also be used for defined words. Ah, interesting one. So I'll show you some sample how others do that. Yeah, Anupji. Any other question? No? Okay. Somebody else also raised hand. Yeah.
Yeah, hello.
Yeah.
Sir, when we are just starting
Mm-hmm.
to, when we are just start learning to draft a contract,
Mm-hmm.
so ideally, which laws should we target initially uh, so that it could be convenient to grasp the governing laws which ultimately governs the contract. As there can be different types of contracts.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, this is yeah.
Okay.
For
For
example,
governing
if
law.
we yes, yes sir.
Okay, we'll discuss that in next class because I think we have that discussion in another boilerplate clause. So I'll explain that. You just remind me.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Okay. Yep. So there's this master sale purchase agreement. I picked from one CLE. Is it visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. In this, if you see the definition, it's within inverted commas and also underlined. Okay. Then again within inverted commas. But what is happening here is that it is a section of definition. In this, it is all the definitions are separately captured. Now let's see if I can find something else. Yeah, in this particular part, the recitals, if you look at GMCL, this GMCL is again within inverted commas and underlined. So basically, what is happening here is that these words are stressed in the draft because if you use a normal font, lowercase, then these are not special words. But when you're saying a capitalized word like GMCL, or let's say a capitalized word like closing date, then these have specific meaning under the contract, which is as per the definitions of those terms. So to stress on those, what the drafter has done, that he has put it within inverted commas and he has also underlined it, like GMCL, like Canadian debt contribution. So these are defined terms. and within inverted commas another line. It is okay if you do not underline it, but ideally, if you are defining it within a bracket, within the statement, or even within a separate one, you can stress on it by capitalizing it and keeping it within inverted commas. Another way to do it is to uh, sp- put these words in bold format also. So some of the contracts you may see that they are also in bold. Is that okay? Any Somebody else also raised hands. Did I miss any question from anyone?
So with this regard definition thing, I have one question.
Mm-hmm.
So in a agreement to sell or sale deed, when we are mentioning the vendor and the vendee, whereas in the first page only, when we are introducing the parties, there only we define who is the vendor and who is the vendee.
Mm-hmm.
So in the entire document, wherever we use, should we put the vendor and vendee into inverted commas?
No, no, no. See,
Not
for example, here if you see the master sale purchase agreement, in this the master sale and purchase agreement is fully capitalized. Okay, and this agreement is within inverted comma. But the reference of this agreement in any other statement, let's see, like, yeah. So if you see this equity subscription agreement, now this is not a defined term. Okay. Agreement word has been used, but it is a different document. It is not this agreement. It is used here. This agreement. Now this is a capitalized word. This is a definition, defined term. But that definition in inverted commas was introduced once only in the initial part, in the first statement. And after that, wherever you are referring, it is just a normal word without any inverted commas. Otherwise, your document will look very, very messy if you put every agreement or every defined term within inverted commas. So it will only be inverted commas, full of inverted commas, and your readability of document will go down. It will be very difficult to read and understand. You try that by doing some practical exercise. You put a paragraph, a couple of paragraphs, and you use one defined term, which is let's say 5 or 6 times used. You put 2, 3 defined terms within inverted commas, and then wherever those terms are appearing, you put them in inverted commas, and you see the effect. The readability will go down. So that is,
Yes, sir. Got it.
so that is not,
Got it, sir. Thank you so much.
yeah, yeah. Someone else was asking question. Anyone else? Anshuji, I did not receive your confirmation, so hopefully you will be drafting the two clauses as I requested.
Yes, I'll do it.
Okay, great. Since you have exams, that's why. Okay, so I think it's better that if we end the session, and I'll wait for all of your submissions, and I request that you send it by latest by Thursday so that I can have a look at it on Friday. And once you send the email, just drop a message, as well as if possible then those clauses that you have drafted with the background, the factual background that you have used. So do some introduction, what background you have picked, and then introduce the clauses. So the background and the two clauses, entire thing, paste it in the Telegram group and also send me by email. Is that okay? Everybody can do that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. I think it's a little bit of double exercise, but why I want to do it is because if you send me by email, and I'll review it individually as and when it comes, because Telegram is something that you can read, but typing things is a little difficult because it's on phone. And if you put it on Telegram, then others can understand what you have done. Okay. So thank you everyone for giving time today, and we'll see you in next class. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
sir.
Thank you. Bye bye.